If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, hit the subscription button now and be sure to click the bell icon so you can be notified when a new video drops. Also, if you're already subscribed, check and make sure the YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. Seems every week I get messages from people saying that they were mysteriously unsubscribed and didn't know when a new video dropped because YouTube took them off my subscription list. And of course, be sure to give the video a like. The white supremacists hate that. Now, that said,
we all have these posters in our closet that is attached to a stick that we sometimes will card out when we're talking about criminal justice policy and those statistics that you first heard when we opened it up, incarceration. And we run around with these signs, build more schools, less jails. Build more schools, less jails. And we walk around everywhere, build more schools, we protest, build more schools, less jails. Put money into education, not prisons. There's a fundamental problem with that approach, in my opinion. And it's this. I agree with that conceptually, but you have not addressed the reason I have 3 padlocks on my front door.
We have confused the idea that to achieve safety, you put more cops on the street, instead of understanding to achieve safe and healthy communities, you put more resources into the public education system of those communities, into affordable housing, into home ownership, into access to capital for small businesses. If you contrast, many communities which have a heavy presence of police to middle and upper middle class suburbs in America, you will not see that presence of police. But what you will see families who have an income that allows them to get through the end of the month. You will see good public schools. You will see people who have access to health care and can afford it. You will see people who have jobs. And so this has to be the conversation.
well, she sure sounds a lot different now than she did 7 years ago, doesn't she? 7 years ago, then California Attorney General Kamala Harris was mocking protesters, people who said build more schools, not jails. She had nothing but derision and mockery and ridicule for them. And she was in a room full of fellow prosecutors, so as far as she was concerned, she could go ahead and let her hair down. She could go ahead and say what she really thought. Because after all, who's going to dig up some know-nothing meeting that she had in a room with a bunch of people who nobody cares about? Well, it turns out the black media dug it up. But the way that she was mocking people who were saying, build more schools, not jails, gee, maybe it's because there's a direct one-to-one correlation between the closure of a school and the building of a prison. Maybe that's why. She sounded a lot like Patrick Lynch and Big Mouth Mike O'Meary and every other white supremacist with a badge that you ever heard. Schools ain't the answer. The answer is you need more white men with guns. That's the answer. Yeah, because it's been working out well so far, hasn't it? But of course, Kamala Harris, seeing the winds of change blowing strong enough to obliterate her, she's singing a different tune today. Now all of a sudden, education is the answer. Now, for the sake of argument, let's go ahead and say that we didn't have any more sense than the average casual racist read white moderate, or the average low-information black voter who apparently believes everything the white media tells them and never bothers to think for themselves. They listen to pork chop preachers and political hustlers and all sorts of social prostitutes who have already whored themselves out to the white powers that be. Let's go ahead and say that we were simple-minded clods like them. Even if I was silly enough to believe that Kamala Harris had some sort of road to Damascus moment, she suddenly discovered religion, do you really want somebody who it requires watching a man be strangled to death by the police? Somebody who has to see nationwide protests, that's what it takes to get them to realize, hey, maybe I was on the wrong track all these decades. That's what it took for her to see that. She has not done a damn thing regarding the murder of Matrice Richardson. She hasn't done a damn thing about that. She has not opened up any cases. Ain't gonna be no justice for Matrice Richardson, yeah, but she's so concerned about the health and safety of black people now. This is Kamala Harris for you. Do you really think, even if I was dumb enough to believe the white media, am I really going to be stupid enough to think that, yeah, this is the kind of person who you want with the nuclear codes? Somebody who's so slow-witted, somebody whose mentality, such as it is so intransigent, whose high heels are dug in so deep that common sense can't even move her. She has to wait until there are riots coast to coast before she looks and goes, might be time for me to rethink some of these dumb positions I've been taking all these decades. This is who's on Joe Biden's short list. Jim Crow Joe Biden wants to make sure that, he might choose a woman of color, but it's going to be somebody who's every bit as much an anti-black racist as he is. But of course, on his short list, you've also got Elizabeth Warren. You guys remember her, Elizabeth Check. What for? The woman who's doggedly against reparations and who, by the way, has been all but MIA when it comes to punishing the police. You haven't heard much from Elizabeth Warren on the subject, have you? She's laying low, real low. I already did a video essay that you can check out on this YouTube channel chronicling for you how this woman has been a lifelong right-wing Republican. Just a matter of, like most people, when it comes to the white supremacist political machine, they will say whatever they think they have to find their niche within it. Ana Navarro is a Republican strategist. She's one of those white Hispanics who has nothing good to say about black people and usually carries water for white supremacy every chance she gets. But even though she's a Republican strategist, you wouldn't know it, judging by what she says on broadcast television and cable news. She criticizes the Trump administration full time, but only the Trump administration. So politics in America is a whorehouse, and you got people who are willing to bend over and spread the cheeks for whomever happens to have the biggest wallet at the moment. But of course, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that another person on Joe Biden's VP shortlist is Susan Rice. Oh, come on, you guys remember Susan Rice, don't you? She was the completely useless, empty suit national security advisor for Barack Obama. Can you think of anything intelligent that this woman ever said? I sure can't. I can think of a lot of dumb things that she said. When Gayle King decided that the death of Kobe Bryant was a good opportunity to try to defame the man, to try to attack him in death when he's not here to defend himself. Oh, the guy's dead, so let's go ahead and bring on one of Kobe Bryant's female acquaintances, a woman who knew him, and what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can get her to say that Kobe Bryant was a rapist. Kobe Bryant was a sexual predator. Let's go ahead and see. So that way we can say, well, we didn't say it. We asked her and she said it. So when she tried and it backfired and people started calling her out, most notably, Snoop Dogg got on Instagram and did his video, and that went viral. All of a sudden, here comes Susan Rice saying, "This is despicable. Gayle King is one of the most principled, fair, and tough journalists alive." Man, that's 3 lies for the price of 1. Ain't a dang thing principled about Gayle King. She has no principles. When it comes to the very epitome of a media prostitute who has whored herself for every interest imaginable, Gayle King would be right beside the dictionary definition of that kind of individual. And fair? Is there anything fair about waiting until a man is dead, with his child, by the way, when you decide that you're going to try to find a way to get somebody to attack him and defame him and demonize him after the man's dead? That's what Susan Rice calls fair. And she's a tough journalist, not when it comes to white sexual predators. Now, when it comes to the white powers that be, she's pretty as you please with them. Ain't nothing tough about it. She's a doggone kitty cat when it comes to the white powers that be. No, Gayle King is a bottom-feeding scumbag who deserves no respect, and anyone who's got anything complimentary to say about her deserves no respect either. But then you had Susan Rice, who decided that she wanted to show all out for the white powers that be. She wanted to make it clear, I'm willing to go overboard for massa. So she wrote, "Snoop, back the F off. You come for Gayle King, you come against an army. You will lose, and it won't be pretty." This is Susan Rice, former National Security Advisor. This is supposed to be a woman who I was told is educated. Always got these sophisticated hood rats who love to throw around that word. I'm educated. Sure can't tell by looking. And this is how this educated woman This Washington insider, former White House staffer for Barack Obama, in case you forgot. This is how she talks. And she does this for Gayle King. You notice a pattern forming, don't you? Joe Biden's shortlist happens to all be primarily women of color, immigrants and immigrant children, by the way, or zaddy worshippers. Those go hand in hand. And all of them with a solid track record of propping up the prison industrial complex and also demonizing black people, particularly black men, every chance they get. This is who Joe Biden chooses. This is who he wants to choose from. Now, of course, we all know what the cynical calculation from Jim Crow Joe Biden is. Basically, they don't have any plays, really. The old cock and bull story has been largely defanged and discredited by the black media. The game is, of course, we tried to stitch together a Frankenstein monster of a coalition with LGBT people and immigrants and, disaffected casual racists, read white moderates. We tried to make that work and it ain't working. The white media is once again rinsing and repeating the same news cycle from 4 years ago. We're being told that Joe Biden is so many points ahead of Donald Trump. Yeah, so is Hillary Clinton all the way up to election night. So they're basically rinsing and repeating the same old media narrative. It's a horse race. It's a horse race. So you better tune in. You better watch. We need clicks. It's a horse race when they already know. No, Joe Biden, forget about ran out of steam. He never had any steam to begin with. Well, except for the hot air that comes out of his mouth. He's got plenty of that. But the strategy, such as it is as desperate as it is pathetic. They figure if they put a bunch of black women's names out there, it's going to make all black women say, oh, I've got to turn out and vote for Joe Biden. He's not going to do a damn thing for me. He's not presenting anything, and he's certainly not addressing any issues that we've brought to him. Oh, but he needs our vote. And he can kick around names like Stacey Abrams and Keisha Apple Bottoms or whatever the hell else he wants to drag out. That's fine. But it's not going to help him. Oh, he likes to front load his little group of advisors with black women whose mammy credentials happen to be pewter plated. Oh, a bunch of fool's gold indeed. And the idea behind it is they're going to be the ones saying that, oh, all this stuff that Jim Crow Joe said since the 70s, that doesn't mean anything. This is what this guy is about. He has not atoned for any of his multitude of human rights violations against the black community. He has not done or said anything to reverse any of the legislation that he put on the books. Just like with Bill Clinton, he's blaming preachers and such. And by the way, have you noticed that the black preachers and such, none of them is willing to take the fall for Jim Crow Joe? Oh, he's out here talking about there were preachers and activists who were asking me to, and none of them are saying, yeah, we were asking him to do it. All right. They're like, oh, who's this we, white man? That's what they're doing to Jim Crow Joe. No honor among thieves, indeed. But from the white media, what Joe Biden is doing, the narrative that they're trying to push is, oh, black people aren't really interested in punishing the police, and you're certainly not hearing anything about reparations, are you? That's the idea. Well, in this election cycle, what people are concerned about is what they really want is for Joe Biden to pick a woman of color. This is the white media attempting to dictate to you what you actually think. They've been trying this for the longest time and failing for the longest time. When old Mike the Bigot Bloomberg went to Brown Chapel AME Church in Selma, calling himself going to get himself some black political cred from some pulpit pimp, oh, sure, the preacher man might be willing to let you in the church, but the parishioners are the ones who decide if your presence there is legitimate. And the black folks stood up and turned their backs on him. Just up until that day, the white media have been talking about how, oh, black voters don't care about Bloomberg's stop and frisk policies. They don't care about his stance on stop and frisk. He's not paying a price. Black voters clearly don't care, clearly do not care at all. And they said that right up until that day. After that happened, Bloomberg dropped out the very next day and the white media was singing a new tune. Well, apparently these black folks haven't forgotten. That lets you know everything you need to know about the white media. They are not in the business of reporting the news. They are in the business of trying to steer and misdirect social opinion. That's what they're in the job of doing. And this whole thing, this fraud with Jim Crow Joe calling himself getting some black women who are going to vouch for him, because that's what their job is. Their job is to actually vouch for him, and they're going to lend their melanin to the lie that, well, black folks don't really care about Joe Biden's past of white supremacy and his policies and sticking up for and promoting anti-black policies and laws and punishment all throughout his adult life. Black folks don't really care about that. Why? Here is Simone Mamie Sanders, and you got this Corinne St. Pierre, another immigrant, mulatto, what have you. You got all these immigrants and all of these biracials and all of these people who have nothing in common with the black folks whose ancestry goes back to the killing fields of America. You got all of these folks who are going to lend their skin color to that lie, and they'll get out there and say, why? I'm part of the black community, and I say he didn't do anything wrong, and nobody cares, and let's talk about Donald Trump. None of them's going to say that Joe Biden is going to stand with any of the policies that the black community is demanding, because their job is to make sure that those policies never come to pass. For the last 3.5 weeks, we've been seeing the result of the anger spilling out into the streets. And what they've been trying to do is a political fraud of, let's say that there's going to be police reform when we're not actually doing anything. This is all one big con game across the board to see if they can get the people to resign themselves to whatever the powers that be do. Can they get the people to go back to, well, we're going to let you guys run things and hopefully you'll do right by us. That's what the goal here is. Right now, the people are in control. Right now, the people are the law. Right now, the white supremacists get punished on sight, and there is no court of appeal from that. And the job now, top priority now, is we got to get these guys to go back to sleep. We got to get these guys to resign themselves to their fate. I know what we'll do is we'll get a whole bunch of black females out here to scream loud as they can how much they love this white man, Joe Biden, and they don't care about his racism. This is how a system of control works. If you want a system of control where you can dial the people in to be oppressed and to be held in bondage for the long haul, what you have to do is you got to make them accomplices in their own bondage. What that means is, on some level, they have to be going along with it. That means they've got to believe in the system or otherwise restrain themselves from tearing it down. They can't be actively attacking it. They've got to be actually playing along with the lie. And what that means is, why, we'll present you with a slate of candidates. Hey, would you like to choose from this white supremacist from Queens, New York, who was discriminating against black people for housing in the 70s and took out a full-page New York Times ad in the late 80s saying that some black teenagers should be given the death penalty for a crime they didn't even commit? Or would you like to choose from this white man from Pennsylvania who happens to have been against school desegregation, and he helped to co-sponsor some of the most draconian laws aimed at black people in the 1980s under the false pretense that it was anti-drug legislation? And that wasn't enough for him. He even wrote the harshest, most draconian crime bill in world history, and now this man wants to be president. So which one do you want to choose from? You want to choose to get from the private citizen who did everything he could to attack black people, or choose from the public servant, quote, in quotes I put servant, who did everything he could to attack black people? Which flavor of white supremacy do you prefer? That's the false choice that they're trying to present people, and seeing if you're dumb enough to fall for it. Because what up until now, until the last few weeks, they seem to have forgotten that people have a third option, and the third option is we take power in our own hands. And it was done without an election. You didn't need Joe Biden to be president to get those 4 thugs in Minneapolis to be indicted and arrested, did you? Didn't need an election. Didn't need police reform, by the way, in order for the cops to be punished in the streets. Didn't need any of that. That stuff was going on. See, what they realized was they better put up a sham of doing what the people are saying, because ultimately what the people do, what the people are willing to agree to, that's the law. And the powers that be, these legislators, they can't be sitting here pushing for legislation and saying, we're going to do some back the badge and some Blue Lives Matters bullcrap. They can't do that because they know what the political response would be. The people would look and say, we're disregarding that. You cannot have politicians who are making all of these rules and the people flagrantly telling them we ain't doing a damn thing. What that means is you got a political class with no power. And a political class who keeps trying to make rules when the people have made it clear what they will or will not obey. That's a political class that's putting themselves in danger of being knocked out the box. So since the winds of change are blowing, they got to put forward some sort of pretense that they're with the program when we all know that they're not. And what you've been seeing for almost a month now, this is what I've been telling you for the longest time. Some of you thought that it was just a hypothetical. No. All you got to do is read a history book, actually study history, and you understand. People who are voting are a people who are not in revolt. Tucker Carlson sat there and told you about that. He said, notice they didn't have a team of lawyers. Yeah, because they're not appealing to the law. And notice they're not trying to persuade anyone. That's right. There's no legislation pending. We're not trying to get any ballot initiatives on the ballot this fall. We're not doing any of that. These changes are not going to be dependent on what happens at a ballot box. See, that's what Ronald Reagan understood when he was talking about the U.S. withdrawing from the UN. And a lot of folks out there, a lot of the slow coast, the weed smoking, sitting on your mama or your girlfriend's couch 8 hours a day smoking a joint crowd, the Xbox clowns, these chumps who will never amount to anything and never accomplish anything and will be worth nothing. These idiots were asking, well, brother, you just saying, that ain't gonna do nothing. How you gonna get anything done without voting? You gotta vote for somebody's. Now you take a look at what's been happening to the police for the last 3 weeks. How many elections have taken place? How many candidates have you gotten into office? Did you get somebody into the White House to get these changes made? Did you get somebody into the governor's mansion? Did you get a new DA elected? Did you get a new state attorney? Did you get a new attorney general of the state? Did you get some new laws on the books? What political changes happening at the ballot box did you get accomplished in the last 21 days? I'll wait. Dr. Claude Anderson told you about that, and some of y'all just didn't listen. These politicians react to the ground underneath them. And I think that Jason Black had a beautiful addendum to that. The power only listens to one of two groups, the ones with money or the ones with guns. Though perhaps a more succinct way of putting it is the ones with money or the ones with weapons. And when you got people in the streets making it very clear the streets are going to be hot, that is the strongest weapon of all, which happens to be a discontented mass of people. You don't have enough handcuffs, ain't got enough prisons, ain't got enough courts, and ain't got enough bullets for all of them. That being the case, you are now faced with a major political problem, which will require a political solution. This is what white supremacy is trying to head off. They see exactly what is happening here. This is not a big ask. Nobody's asking anything. It is a demand. And white supremacy's got to figure out a way to get the people to back off their own demand. Well, first thing you do is you go ahead and have the politicians claim, we're going to do exactly what you said. We're going to, oh, yes, indeed. You guys said police accountability. That's what it's going to be. No, we said punish the police. That's right. Police accountability. They're going to be held accountable. There will be accountability. No, we said punishment, not accountability. Accountability is what you've been claiming all along. We said punishment. Well, there's going to be a ban on chokeholds. We didn't say ban chokeholds. We said criminalize them, carry serious prison time. Well, maybe, except unless the officer feels it's for his safety or the safety of others, which is exactly what you got now. So there goes your loophole. Which, of course, everyone's going to be claiming. See, the thing is, they're trying to get you to back off of what you've been doing to protect yourself and to make sure that the police who break the law are held accountable. They're never going to be held accountable by the courts and the DAs and the politicians because these guys need to have an organized, dedicated gang of thugs with weapons to enforce all of these illegal and unconstitutional laws that they have on the books, all of these illegal and unconstitutional strictures and social policies that they put in place that are there to safeguard the privilege and power of the elite white powers that be, and to keep you in subjugation. They require guns, plenty of guns, well-funded guns, military-grade weaponry, in order to make sure you don't call yourself upsetting that social order. So they're not going to have a situation where they tell these guys, well, we're going to punish you for protecting the power of the white elite. That's not going to be on the table. That's not going to be part of the agenda. But they're trying to fool you into thinking that, well, they're going to put something, they're doing something. There's a difference between activity and producing. There's a big difference. You run around in circles, that's plenty of activity, but it produces nothing. And that's the con. And Joe Biden, the political equivalent thereof, they can't think of anything new to do. They're tapped out because they understand when you show up, see, it ain't Donald Trump that Biden's concerned about. Yeah, Biden hasn't been making an appearance in a month, and the reason why is he's scared. He's scared of the black vote because that's the only thing that's going to actually get him into the White House. That's the reason why he's putting up this political fraud of, I'm going to choose a woman of color meaning black. He ain't got no Asian women on that list. Ain't got no Hispanic women on that list. But he does have some black female immigrants. He does have some black female immigrants. He's got them on the list. And Biden's concern is that the same questions that people have been asking about the police being allowed to commit murders with impunity, they're also going to be asking, hey, Joe Biden, what the hell you been doing for the last 50 years? Oh, that's right. You have been turbocharging the prison industrial complex. Joe Biden has been the principal cheerleader for police brutality and anti-black racial profiling. Joe Biden has been the biggest supporter that the thugs in blue have had. And that's what he doesn't want to have to answer. That's what he's scared of. Having a couple of absent-minded senile gaffes on camera is nothing compared to him getting that work like Mike Bloomberg did. That's what he's trying to protect himself from because he knows it's coming. Everybody saw what happened to Jacob Fry in Minneapolis. You had the black folks who called him out and said, we'll put your raggedy behind out of office. And nobody was sitting there going, well, wouldn't that mean a Republican gets in there? People are becoming politically mature. If the individual or individuals who are claiming that they want your vote, if they don't do anything for you, then what the hell? There is no incentive not to let the other side get in. Hell, it's not as if these guys were doing anything for you anyway. You can either take rude political opposition to your interest, or you can take courteous political opposition to your interest. It's a distinction without a difference. Just like being stupid enough to try to choose between Jim Crow Joe Biden and Donald Trump. There is no difference between the two. They're both a couple of elderly white men who have been using their money and their political office to fight a war against black people. They've been prosecuting an anti-black race war against black people since the 70s. Both the similarities between Biden and Trump far outweigh the differences. I can't think of any differences. They both spout the exact same salt of the earth pablum when it comes to the working class, when it comes to farmers in the heartland. They cut and paste the same empty words. But when it comes to black people, you find out, this is where you find out that both of them are on the same page about that too. On the exact same page. So no trotting out your hand-picked mammy, whether it's Simone Sanders to try to double speak for you, or whether it's Kamala Harris to try to give her blessing to you. Yeah, the same ugly questions Kamala Harris got, Joe Biden's going to get them too. And he figures if he lays low, hopefully there will be this summer, hopefully there's going to be enough attention on, we got to get Trump out of office and ignore the past. It doesn't matter what Joe Biden's done. Well, hell, if it doesn't matter what Joe Biden's done, then does it matter what Donald Trump has done? Can we apply the same logic to Trump? No, we're holding everyone accountable who has fought against our interest. Everyone who has done us wrong. This is the era not of accountability, but of punishment. It's time to pay the piper. And the piper's got a doggone bill that's a mile long. You got a ton of debts you got to pay. And you're not going to hide behind some woman of color. You ain't doing that. When it comes to having to be punished for the anti-black war that he's carried out, Joe Biden is every bit as culpable as Donald Trump. They've worked hand in hand. Playing a phony game of, these guys really don't like each other. Just like on professional wrestling, they pretend not to like each other either. While Trump is busy giving political donations to Hillary Clinton. Do you have any idea the level of contempt and self-loathing you got to have for yourself to even consider voting for Joe Biden after he brings out some crap like this? The bastard's not saying what he's going to do for black folks, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you to go back to abusing yourself and beating up yourself, because that's what you get if you say, Susan Rice, she could be vice president, while she covers for and threatens black men who call out an anti-black race-baiting scumbag like Gayle King. When you defend the memory and the honor of a black man's reputation, here comes Susan Rice saying, how dare you? You're going to come up against an army. An army of who? An army of sophisticated hood rats? Who's this army that Susan Rice is talking about? Well, when you look at who it is that Susan Rice is taking photos with, you see Joe Biden, you see Barack Obama, you see Nancy Pelosi, but you also see a bunch of white men in media. See, that's the army she's talking about. She's talking about an army of white supremacists and their black bootlicks. I mean, people of color bootlicks. That's Susan Rice's army that she's talking about. But she's not talking about the grassroots. She ain't talking about the black street. She has no influence, no credibility, and no desire to be part of that, and that's fine. But when she's talking about her army, some army, but we all saw what happened, didn't we? Snoop Dogg eventually did a 180, and it wasn't the black grassroots that made him do that. It was Susan Rice's army, no doubt. But that's who and what Susan Rice is about. You go ahead and demonize a black man, and Susan Rice will give you thumbs up. You call yourself standing up for a black man who's being demonized and standing up against anti-black racism, Susan Rice goes ahead and sicks her army on you. And now the white media is trying to get you to think that there's something okay with her being vice president. If you thought that Barack Obama's behavior was egregious and reprehensible, Susan Rice is giving you a preview of what she's got in mind. When it comes to white supremacists like Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Susan Rice will give a tisk and they need some sensitivity, and the police out here murdering black people in the streets, they need retraining and perhaps a history lesson and tell them about our feelings. But when it comes to black people, specifically to black men, Susan Rice has no sympathy. She's not soft pedaling anything. Instead, it's going to be you get a harsh lecture at best and you get threats at worst. And now this woman is angling to be vice president. She certainly is not saying to the white media, hey, I don't even want to be talked about as vice president. I have no interest in that. No, as far as she's concerned, she's keeping her nose open, keeping her ear to the ground. That's what she's about. And I'm sure that Susan Rice will be servicing Joe Biden the same way that another Rice, Condoleezza Rice, was servicing W back in the day. Say, what position did Condoleezza Rice have? I'm just curious. Anybody remember what job she had? Oh, that's right. Condoleezza Rice was National Security Advisor for W2. You see how this game goes round and round, right? Musical chairs indeed. This is the scam that's being perpetrated. And the individuals behind it, you see that there's no difference here. You're going to be voting. For those of you who at this late date, the slow coast who are still trying to give yourselves excuses to do the same old, what the hell are you voting for? What are you voting for? What are you expecting to get? You've had 4 years of President Trump. And what you've had is, on the one hand, sure, this guy talks trash about black folks. But what you've also had is you had a lot of these other groups, they've had for the first time in generations had to be brought in for some abuse. That's what they're angry about. What they're angry about is these white supremacists are finally deciding we ain't going to be polite about this anymore. We're putting aside any sort of pretend congeniality. We're just going to tell y'all what we think. That's what they're angry about. They're getting a hard reminder that no matter what they may have told themselves, they're not really on the team. That they were only brought in, mostly the immigrants largely brought in, as a demographic counterweight to the former slaves. That was the idea behind it. Bring them in, and this is going to be the means by which white supremacy could point and say, hey, here, you can't say that just because these black folks are all getting locked up and they're all being slowly but surely strangled literally out of existence. You can't say that that's some sort of anti-black war. Why, here are all of these non-black people, all these non-white groups who we brought in, and why there's even a few of these niggers from the Caribbean and Africa among them. And you see, they're okay. Okay, granted, they're not as well off as they used to be, and their situation is getting worse every day, but they're better off than these former slaves, and that's proof positive that it must have been these slaves. You see, it was them. It was their fault all along. It was nothing we were doing. That was the lie that they wanted to manufacture. They wanted a docile, compliant group of non-whites who they could bring in as a political operation. The idea being these black folks, all of these former slaves, they've been making noise. And they're trying to bring down white supremacy. We need some folks who are not going to do that. Some people who are already on the team. Individuals who we had a chance to vet before they got here. And that's where you get people like Condoleezza Rice from. And that's where you get people like Joy Reid from. And that's where you get people like Kamala Harris from. And Susan Rice and all the rest of them. See, the bad guys understand a basic truth about human psychology. At the end of the day, it's not what people say, it's what they do that matters. They also understand that if after everything that's happened, after the uprising that's taken place, if you have black folks who see all this and actually start making the right kind of noises for a change, if after all that, these black folks can still be cajoled or coerced or persuaded, or they can be somehow made to go back to the same old, well, what that means is they're back on the treadmill and you've dialed white supremacy in for total control for another generation or so. Might be a couple of bumps along the road, but basically what they're saying is we weren't serious. We weren't serious about our power. And you can bring in individuals who have attacked black people, individuals who have defended the demonizing and the smearing of black people in death. What Susan Rice was doing, that's no different than taking any other black person who you want to think of. Doesn't matter if it's Tamir Rice, doesn't matter if it's Charlene Lyles, doesn't matter who it is. That's no different than taking George Floyd and saying that if you can't demonize George Floyd, well, I'll send my army after you if you try to question me on that. That's what it means. The abusing and demonizing of black people in death, and then boldly saying you better not say anything about it. That's part of white supremacy's breaking process. When you have people who are prohibited from doing what they would naturally do, what their conscience dictates that they do, what common morality and common sense demands that they do, when you make it where these people no longer act and think for themselves and do what they know to be right, instead they only do what they know you want them to do, that's a breaking process. That's how you break somebody mentally. They restrain themselves from doing what they know to be right. They don't do what they know that they should do, and they only do what they know you want them to do. So Susan Rice, what she's doing, that's no different than what you see these alt-right trolls online doing when they're mocking George Floyd or mocking any other black victim of white supremacist violence. That's what Susan Rice has done. How does she sound any different? How is she any different than any alt-right scumbag who's running around mocking a dead black person who a white supremacist murdered? How is Susan Rice any different? And the fact that the white media is not bringing that up, what does that tell you? This is how controlled opposition works. As Dr. Noam Chomsky put it, it is the most sophisticated form of propaganda when something presents itself as opposition when in reality it's actually support. And you see, it doesn't take much to notice the difference, but too many black people, they're expecting someone else to fight for their power. They're expecting someone else to fight for their liberation, expecting somebody else to put forward the money and the muscle in order to get them free. And well, that seems to be too much trouble. So that being the case, if nobody else is going to fight for my freedom, then I'll just go ahead and I'll be out here ducking and dodging these white supremacists on the streets and hoping that they don't get me today. Well, that's fine. All you clowns at this late date still trying to find a comfortable place under white supremacy, you're going to wind up being roadkill on white supremacy's genocidal march. And Susan Rice will probably be defending that too. Gayle King was not at all concerned about trying to put anybody on the hot seat regarding Woody Allen, wasn't trying to make anyone speak against Woody Allen, but then again, you look at who Susan Rice's army is, and you realize these are the same clowns that Gayle King desperately wants to keep getting money from, so there you go. But family, you make sure you stay on your square. What we are doing is not dependent on what the white media covers or how they cover it. We were out here doing the work long before Black Lives Matters, long before George Floyd was murdered, long before the very hot summer of 2020. And we told you this was coming. We told you this was coming. Coronavirus ain't really got much to do with this at all. That might be for the white folks. The white folks might be looking and going, oh, coronavirus, we had to get out of the house. But for black folks, we told you this stuff was building to a head. Dr. John Henrik Clarke talked about this. He said that it takes between 10 and 20 years for a revolt or a revolution to gain momentum. That was one of the things Dr. Clarke talked about. It takes between 10 and 20 years for a revolt or a revolution to gain momentum. And he was absolutely right. So remember, our job out here is not to be cheerleading for one flavor of white supremacy as opposed to the next. Our job is to understand where our power comes from and to fight for that power aggressively with everything that we've got. Because the bad guys are throwing all of this white noise at us, they're trying to bring up the coronavirus again. They're trying to bring up trade with China. Oh, there's a skirmish on the Chinese-Indian border. In other words, they're trying to give themselves permission to move on. And as far as they're concerned, if they move on, hopefully we will stop what we're doing. Nope. They're testing our resolve and our discipline. They're trying to find out if we meant what we said, or if they can get us off our square. We have to demonstrate to the entire world that we are one-issue voters. Foundational black Americans, descendants of American slaves, survivors of slavery in America, many names but the same concept. Not to be crapping on the brothers and sisters from the diaspora, from the immigrants, what have you. But the thing is, we're talking about those of us whose blood is deep in the soil of this nation because it was shed by white supremacy. The cost of building an empire was our black blood, and it was taking away the futures of countless generations of black people in order to build this empire of anything but liberty. And that being the case, the bills come due with interest. That's what this is about. The people who built this country are now demanding what is owed to them. If we are not all equally economically secure, then we will all be equally economically insecure. If our tangibles are not all equally safe and respected, then we will all have tangibles that are equally unsafe and unprotected. Don't come up to me whining and complaining because a couple of stores got torched. If you don't give a damn about the human rights of black people, then don't expect anyone to respect your property rights. That's how that goes. If the life of a black man who dies in a helicopter crash is fair game for everyone to decide to demonize him, and if it's okay to do that to a black man, then it's going to have to be okay to do it to everyone, and everyone must have that happen across the board. It can't just be a matter of, oh, this happened to a black guy for the umpteenth time, and, oh, well, there was some social media pushback about it and controversy, and, well, we're moving on to the next story. No, we ain't moving on to a damn thing. You see, we understand that the job of the white media is to control public opinion and to be able to divert it and misdirect it in directions the white supremacy wants. The white media's job is to make the nation and the world by extension safe for white supremacy, because people will think of it as something other than white supremacy. We dare not call it white supremacy. All of these soldiers that white supremacy sends around the world in order to make sure that white men who already have too much as is can continue to have it all. Well, we're not going to call that white supremacy. We're going to call that liberating oppressed nations. Well, the United States needs somebody to liberate the oppressed black masses here. So what about that? Well, we better head that off. I know what we'll do. We'll have the legislators get in front of the cameras and they'll spout some empty rhetoric about police reform, and the Congress will talk about what it wants to do, and the Supreme Court will take all of these lawsuits regarding qualified immunity and throw them back at Congress. They're not even going to hear it. And the rest of the world will think that the U.S. is doing something. We'll go ahead and just keep repeating that until hopefully people move on to something else. That's the game plan right now. Whether or not they are successful will depend on us, but understand something. Power does not take a vote. Power is not completely and thoroughly slavishly dependent on the outcome of an election to get what it wants. Power doesn't sit there and take an opinion poll as to whether or not its interests ought to be obeyed, ought to be upheld, and ought to be enforced. Power doesn't do that. Power says what it's going to be, and then that's what is. White supremacy has been used to having the bully pulpit where everybody else has to look out for them and you better watch out. White supremacy's passing through. They're not used to a status quo where the former slaves start pushing back and pushing back hard. They're not used to that. And they're frightened right now because what they understand is the people are waking up and understanding and realizing, hey, we can stop this and we don't have to be waiting to see if some corrupt political apparatus that is rotten to the core is going to, by accident, present a presidential candidate who's going to do the right thing. We can force our will on these bastards. And you know what you call that? You call that democracy. But as Dr. John Henrik Clarke wisely observed, this nation has never had democracy for a single day in its existence. And it would collapse to dust within an hour if it ever tried. The United States is not a democracy, never has been. I told you what it is. It's a fascist state. They have the fascies all over Washington, D.C., in the places of government. They're letting you know exactly what kind of system that you're under, and it's not democratic at all. And here you are pushing for democracy. And their job is to get you off of that. And they're going to be trotting out some hand-picked Negroes, people of color, to try to sell the soap on that one. Well, don't you fall for it. Don't you forget what any of these bastards have said. Because the thing is, today you got people who are confronting the mayor of Minneapolis on his sins. Tomorrow they're going to be calling out Joe Biden, and everybody's going to be understanding where that came from. They know that this didn't come from any white think tank. This didn't come from some entrenched white interest who is trying to maintain the status quo or some white liberals who are trying to elbow their way into the table of power. See, white supremacy knows what to do about that because that's normal for them. You expect a few white folks on the outside who are trying to buck for a position at white supremacy's table to maintain the status quo. You expect that from them. That's part of the reason why you got this LGBT thing going on. Here we are in the middle of a uprising to defend and protect the lives of black people. And next thing you know, the white media is carpet bombing us with rainbow flags and it's all about LGBT. What the hell does the murder of black people by white supremacists have to do with LGBT anything? Nothing. That's the entire point. It's got nothing to do with it. It's changing the subject. That's what it is. Oh, don't you worry. Hey, these Confederate monuments that are running around, what the hell does the Confederacy have to do with LGBT anything? This is a matter of, oh, there are cameras over here talking about what's of interest to black people. Well, you make sure you put that rainbow flag in front of it. We don't want them talking about black people here. Let's direct the conversation somewhere else. Ooh, wouldn't that look bad? Not if we get a person of color, a LGBT black man to get in front of the cameras and say it. Then that'll make, hopefully, that we can hide behind him. We can hide behind his melanin. See the same con game going on at all levels over and over again. And don't be bashful about calling this stuff out. You're in a fight for your survival right now, and the bad guys are throwing everything against the wall. But, well, they're running out of stuff to throw. In fact, truth is they ran out a long time ago. They're just throwing the same old stuff again. Whatever they threw against the wall that didn't stick, they're picking it up and hurling it at the wall again. Maybe this time it'll stick. Thunk, thwop, nope. Maybe again, thump, thwop, again. When you have them picking Kamala Harris out of the trash bin, a woman whose political campaign for president, such as it was, crashed and burned, she already showed you that her secret weapon, be it her prosecutor's background or her sorority ties, which means black boule, she's already demonstrated to everybody she ain't got no stroke. She has no pull. She has absolutely no influence with the black street. You don't see any of these people in the uprising talking about Kamala Harris. If only she was in charge. But that's the scam. White supremacy is picking all of these prosecutors and DAs and all of these career chumps who have spent their lives attacking black people, and they're trying to figure out, can we get you to support them? Because if we can get you to support them, even while you're in the midst of protesting in the streets, if we can get you to go for them anyway and say that these people should be over you, hell, now we know we got you again. You're towing the line again. That's what the goal here is. And our mission is to make sure that they do not succeed.